Organizations like the South African Trust enable organizations like Hanya African Institute for Community-Driven Development to have the regional dimension which other funders don't seem to have. So what we see most beneficial is the value adding of a trust like South African Trust is giving us that regional dimension.
Apart from giving financial support, we have also been able to benefit from the issues the Southern African Trust feel it wants to get involved in, or that's important for it as a trust in a Southern African context. And we have been invited to several meetings organized by the trust. We have been involved with other organizations working in Southern Africa. So the trust has almost provided a space where we can engage with the SADC NGO Council, with the Southern African Trade Union Council and other organizations, and that's important for us.
With the groundwork having been laid for the building blocks of the Southern Africa Trust, within its first year of operation, it provided grants to the value of $4.5 million to 70 organizations in the region, addressing policies to reduce vulnerability to hunger, to improve community involvement in the management of natural resources, and to ensure that regional integration in Southern Africa benefits the poor. The Trust uses the learning from its engagement in policy interventions to target and focus its grant-making in ways that close the gaps in policy processes. This unique, innovative and engaged approach that combines strategic analysis and learning with grant-making has to be sustainable to make a lasting impact against poverty. Poverty-reducing work that is defined over a long period is therefore favored by the Trust.
Aim of our project, basically, it's poverty reduction to local farmers. We want to look at the local micro-level production, because one of the big things that peasants, they produce, but they don't have access to market. How we'll achieve it? We want to look to the partnership between private sector, the peasant associations, so that if we look to the private sector, that they can buy the products from the peasants, so that they have already market there, and this will help them to improve their livelihood condition.
And we need all the experience accumulated by SAT in other countries, and to give our contribute to the poverty reduction also.
A decision has been taken by Summit and Council for SADC to host a conference in poverty. So it is pleasant to note that the Southern Africa Trust decided to join as to assist the SADC Secretariat in putting in place one financial assistance to prepare the conference, but also the expertise that we need to have to prepare the conference.
An example of the Southern Africa Trust's support to organizations whose policy work is rooted in the practical experiences of poor people is the work of the African Wildlife Foundation. The foundation enables communities to be involved in the management of shared fishing resources between Zimbabwe, Mozambique and Zambia. It is supporting impoverished fishing communities to define and apply the SADC protocol on natural resources.
As time goes by, the population also increases. Then as a result, there are so many fishermen with only 2 rivers. Then the place itself is small. Then having that small place, the fish has got no place to breed.
The management of a resource like the aquatic resource really needs those who use it and those who come up with the policing policies. The community look at government as they are stopping us from catching fish. And the African Wildlife Foundation, with the funding support from Trust, have bridged this kind of 2 banks that don't meet to sit down and discuss what kind of gaps are there. In this partnership of the community and the government and ourselves, we actually have built up a mutual dialogue where the community has accepted government to come and give them extension services.
The Southern African Trust has brought value to our interventions by way of bringing aspects of governance and community sensitization to participate in policy initiatives and contribution, and also to a great extent in terms of financial support. They've been able to solicit for funding from various partners which are now using in the project we are working on now. And they've also provided platforms for dialogue across the region where our staffers are invited to participate and contribute to some policy dialogues at different levels within the Southern African region.
In building an enabling environment for governments, businesses and civil society organizations to work together to overcome poverty, the Trust identifies innovative practices in the region that work. These living examples are a source of learning and inspiration for others. They represent the beginnings of a new approach to tackle poverty that can shape better practices in the future. Through its Drivers of Change Award, the Trust brings to the fore the best practices and new methods that are making a real and lasting difference in the lives of people living in poverty. Dr. Jose Negrao, the inaugural winner of the Drivers of Change Award, for example, was an individual who inspired the lives of many people in Mozambique and throughout Southern Africa who are working to end poverty, especially because of his tireless efforts to build better dialogue on poverty between governments and civil society organizations. He was also a researcher who was convinced that poverty cannot be overcome without the active engagement of people who live in poverty, including their active participation in shaping the policies aimed at overcoming poverty.
Drivers of Change is about identifying new, creative and innovative ways of addressing problems. Working with people, identifying organizations, corporations, but also individuals that are working for change in new ways, to make that known, to share that knowledge and begin to start a different conversation in the region, so that it's not only about doing the same old things in the same old way. It's not about ownership of idea, but it's about saying, here, ideas are, they don't have a copyright, they are shared. Learn from it. This is what's worked for us, what's failed. Take it and use it and grow it.
To further promote the work done by civil society organizations in Southern Africa, media houses such as the Mail and Guardian, a weekly newspaper published in South Africa, and Interpress servers are supported to expand their regional coverage of poverty and development issues so that a public dialogue on the challenge of poverty is sustained.
In that section of the Mail and Guardian, our objective is to try and highlight pro-poor policies, formulation and implementation across the continent, and also to try and highlight best practice as far as issues relating to the poor are concerned, and indeed, highlight what we think are good news kind of stories that are coming from the continent.
If the voices of the poor are not asserted in the public sphere and in policy dialogue, other interests are likely to dominate, both in the development and the implementation of policies. It is therefore crucial to build democratic participation and create accountable and responsive governance if voices of the poor are to shape policies.
We are here actually to engage Parliament, because if you know, the Pan-African Parliament includes all parliaments in the continent. They are all part of it. So what we have done here is to facilitate, we call it the first consultative dialogue between the Pan-African Parliament